I've got to tell you that, all joking aside, I've thoroughly enjoyed Gibb's friendship. He's taught me that if you are optimistic and positive, you'll have a great life and achieve many dreams. Maybe get into some trouble, but what the hell, that's life. To the organizing committee responsible for this evening, thank you for the invite. Gib, I wish you much health and continued success. You must be proud to be amongst some of our fine elites of the community all getting cooked tonight. On behalf of your friends, your partners in crime on Lake Temiskaming, Raymond Crawford, Jim Lynn, Donnie Brennan, Red James, thank you for being there and keep up with the enthusiasm and optimism. Gib, thank you.
Well, I'm the last of the salad speakers, and I promise I won't be up here for more than about 5 or 6 minutes. I can assure you the person I'm going to roast tonight is not a greenhorn, although once I'm done with it, it'll be a little more green around the edges. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gib's younger brother. I guess I didn't have to say younger, because just by looking at us you can tell, right? I'm the one with the full head of hair, the svelte body and all that. And when I go to the barber, God, when he shows me my head in the back, with the mirror in the back of my head, I don't look at him and go, God, I'm not paying for this haircut, there's a big hole on top. So, I'm the younger of the two. Nice hair there, Gib. So, when I was trying to prepare my speech here for Gib, I was sitting in my basement in front of television around, news time. Had a pad of paper and I was jotting down ideas of what I would talk about. And one of the things I was going to talk about is the night that Betsy bit the bullet. The sour moose hunting story that Richard just told us about Gib shooting a moose in his younger days. Well, it actually wasn't a moose, it was a cow. But what he didn't tell you is that what they had to do, they actually did have to pay the farmer for that cow. And what they did is they had to sell downtown Pembroke the meat on the corner of the street. And they're trying to sell roasts and legs and stuff to raise money to pay the farmer. And Richard also mentioned that Gib was up on Lac du Moine, lost in the middle of the night. But one thing he doesn't really realize, that Gib has gotten lost once on Lac du Moine in broad daylight. 12 noon, high noon. He was, my wife's uncle flew in from Slovakia and he was visiting here in Canada. And his dream of a lifetime was to come up north and go fishing in the Great White North. And I said, geez, my brother, he's, the last of Mohicans, and he's the guy who's going to bring you up there and really show you, Lac du Moine. He's been there 18 years in a row. God, he knows the lake like the back of his hands. So we landed early in the morning that day, and we head out on the lake, a beautiful sunny day. And of course, we had a few drinks, too many probably. But it's about 12:30, 1 o'clock. I said, okay, we've got to head back to the camp. It's like 90 degrees, beating sunlight. Sure, let's head back, he says. Well, we ended up wrong direction, lost on Lac du Moine in broad daylight. So my wife's uncle's there like, geez, we're lost, what's happening? The gas tank's going down, quarter tank. So I had to save the day that day and bring him back to camp, but I think a lot of you don't know, I guess, that Gib in his younger days was a prolific hockey player. He played in the Pontiac League, was in Bryson for many years. And so the other day I was on the internet and I was looking up to see if I could find Pontiac League statistics. And by Joe's I did. And here's Gilbert Ladouceur's hockey statistics, which are as follows. 1,672 broken hockey sticks. 104 miles of hockey tape. 10,492 penalty minutes. 27 broken teeth. 16 broken noses while duking it out. 13 dislocated jaws from those flying Ladouceur elbows. And 72 tubes of Brill cream. Oh yes, and he had 3 goals and 2 assists. Not bad for a 7-year career. While I was sitting down in my basement trying to delve and jotting down those ideas and what I would talk about, and Richard did steal my story about that moose that was actually a cow, the news was on. Good Lord, my brother appears on television. He's trying to sell something about home care or something to the Quebec government, and I go, geez, my brother. And a few minutes later, the phone rings. My sister Leanne lives in London, Ontario. And I say, Leanne, you wouldn't believe it. There's Gib on television. He's trying to do an end run on a politician. I don't know what he's doing up there. So she says, well, younger brother says, well, I'm the younger brother, that's true. And she says, it's not the first time he's done this, actually. So I'd like to take you back on it. She told me this story, and I'd like to take you back to Timiskaming, 1958. Back then, the mayor's name was, oh yeah, Mr. Irwin. Irwin Park was named after him. And I guess the chief of police then was Mr. Dupo. Big guy, big fingers, grabbing the back of the neck would really hurt. And Timiskaming was like a flower city. I mean, there was flowers, flower beds everywhere, just like today. It was beautiful, rose gardens and it was 1958. It was the end of July, and my mother was here tonight. Was giving birth to a bouncing baby boy at the hospital in Timiskaming. That'd be me. And my brother was, I can imagine his head thinking, well, geez, my mother's in the hospital, what do I want to get her? I should get her something nice, maybe some roses, some flowers, and he's about 13 years old back then, and you know, back then your allowance was 25 cents and you get maybe a chip or a pop, or maybe 2 chips and a pop back then. And so he said, you know, he's walking by, town used to have beautiful rose gardens, walking by a rose garden, looking, geez, you know, if I got a bouquet of roses for Mom, that'd be really nice. Excuse me, I'm sure she'd really enjoy that. So, Gib being, you know, remembering Mr. Dupo with the big fingers in the back of his neck, going, geez, if I do that, he's going to find out his little pal like Timiskaming's going to get me, so what can I do? So he sat there and I'm just trying to recreate the situation, right? So he's probably thinking about, you know, if I talk to the mayor, Mr. Irwin, and ask him if I could pick some flowers for Mom, then everything would be okay. So my brother does that, talks to the mayor, and the mayor says, sure, you know, for your mom in the hospital, why don't you go and pick some flowers, that'd be a nice thing. So he goes to the rose garden, and I'm not sure exactly where it was in Timiskaming, but there was supposedly a lot of roses. But he didn't pick her 1 rose, nor 2 roses, nor a dozen. He picked them all. So there's a little guy with a big bouquet of roses walking into the hospital. And of course, being a small town the way it is, it didn't take long for Mr. Dupo to find out that the young Ladisher boy had been cutting down the rose garden. So he shows up at our place. My dad answers the door. And, you know, says, well, your son's in trouble now. And Gib stands up and says, well, no, I talked to the mayor. The mayor said it was okay. So there he is again, doing an end run around the politicians, right? Going out there and saying, I just got a few roses, but God, he took the whole flower bed. Gib, you'll never change. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you now to please stand and raise your glass to Gib on this special evening. We love you, Gib.
As the house began to take shape, it was almost impossible on the weekends to get onto our drive, because the house became the major Timiskaming tourist attraction. In fact, if we'd realized it was going to be so popular, we wouldn't have needed a fundraiser like this one. We would have charged them much more than we're charging tonight. We used to sit on our Sunday and listen to some of the comments that the people were saying as they went round the house next door. And there was a little room at the front, breakfast nook, and the people looked at this and they couldn't understand what this was going to be. A lot of them thought it might be a boiler room, but others thought it might even be a chapel. Finally, the house was finished on the outside and the painters came. And they had to paint all inside the house. But unfortunately, at this time, it was snowing. So the whole site was covered in deep snow. And these painters used to come very early in the morning. And then they'd spend 20 minutes trying to get their truck up to the house. But it was impossible in the end. So they used to park on the other side. So Sheila and I had to get used to all this noise first thing in the morning. However, once the house was completed, then it was time to build a wall along the property line between Frank and ours. And Frank built a very special wall that had small holes in it. And this became perfect homes for chipmunks. They all took up residence, and we think Frank may regret this later on. Once the house was complete, Frank moved on to landscape. And he had all the lawns laid out and all the flower beds. And then one day Sheila went to get some vegetables out of our garden. And then she found many, many snakes this time. So the next few years, Frank really got into gardening. And by the way, we always knew when Frank was going to go gardening, because it was the only time we ever saw him wear his suit. But once he got out there and did his vegetable garden, the snakes came again. But this time we got our own back on him, because we had a groundhog. And we sent that over to him. And we also had 5 raccoons, and they all went as well. Then the next thing, he put in an underground irrigation system. And there was a lot of trouble with this at first. All the water went in the wrong direction. But finally, he redirected it. And so now we have the best roses in Temiskaming. Well, we know Frank loves wildlife from all this. We know he loves snakes, chipmunks, groundhogs, and even raccoons. I haven't mentioned, but they can come. But when you look out of our house in the morning, if Frank is leaving in his truck, he goes down the road. Then he doesn't have Eileen beside him, but he has Muffy. Now, for those of you who don't know who Muffy is, Muffy's a little white dog that was a Christmas gift to Eileen. And in fact, when if you go outside and see Frank's cake, you can see Muffy on the cake out there. And this little dog goes with Frank everywhere. He goes with him when he's gardening, but then, Frank's very busy gardening, so the dog takes off, so he lands up in our house. But we have a cat, and our cat goes back to his house occasionally. Sometimes we're sure he's got lost, but he turns up, he's been on Frank's lap for 2 or 3 hours. When Frank first moved in, we used to wake up in the middle of the night, and we thought there was a really bright moon outside on the other side of our drapes, because it was so light. And then we realized it was an artificial light, very, very bright. And there was one time when this artificial light went on all night, and we learned later that Gibby and Frank were preparing a meal for a group of friends the next day. And they decided this would have to be a very special meal. But it was so special that perhaps one of them was, well, both of them were drinking. They spent all night on this. And the next morning at 6 o'clock they were still doing it, so Frank went off to the mill and Gibby went to the hospital. There's another thing you may see if you look outside Frank's house. You often see a taxi waiting there. Now, this taxi waits a long time sometimes. But I can tell you the drivers have got Frank sass because they bring their lunch usually nowadays. There's just one question I'm going to ask Frank. And because he's got some very interesting brick pillars at the front of his house. If you go past, you can see them. And we've been wondering for at least 6 years what these are for. But we must say that we find Frank the perfect neighbour. We don't have any real complaints about him. But of course he's not there very often. Now, Frank, have you got a penny? Because you need to buy what I have for you. I've got something for you. I've mentioned about some of these neighbour problems, but I'm going to give him something now to help. I'm going to give him a tree lopper, because we have apple trees that go over his grass, and it probably spoils his grass, so now he can cut the bits off.
So much for the apple tree.
Now, just for a very quick moment, I'm going to become a little more serious, because I was reading Time magazine just after they'd announced the person of the century. Of course, it was Albert Einstein. But I read the next week's article, and there was a little letter in it, which I'm going to read to you. The entrepreneur is the person of the century. We are entering our longest peaceful period of economic expansion since World War II. Entrepreneurs have created tens of millions of jobs through their innovation and hard work. And you can imagine, once I read that, there was only one person I was thinking of, and that was Frank Dettori.
Hi, good evening. I don't have a song. Sheila, just at this point, I'm wondering why I actually volunteered to do this. It's at the mill, when you do something stupid that involves your boss, usually you call it a CLM, a career-limiting move. And this well could be a CLM for me tonight. I've known Frank for years. When he was a young guy, he used to sit on the bank stairs passing the evening away. And I've worked for him for about 25 years. And I have to admit, Frank, in that whole time, I don't remember you doing anything funny. This is a very serious guy. This is a man who's run Tembec for 25 years. He's obviously lots of pressure, lots of hard work. People marvel just how young he looks, and the fact that, especially that he's got no gray hair. Frank's comment always is, I don't get gray hair, I give gray hair. And what he does is he points to me to show how successful he's been at that. Frank travels a lot. He's gone all the time. He hasn't seemed to realize yet that he always seems to have a house full of new furniture. Eileen has a system. Frank's gone a week, a new chair. 2 weeks, a new sofa. 3 weeks, well, you get the picture. We figure now they've got enough furniture to start up the White Oaks Inn again as a hotel. People figure that Frank has no hobbies. You know, I live next door to him and know that he loves gardening. Or at least he loves the idea of gardening. Frank's idea is to rush out as soon as the snow is gone, spend 3 days, 20 hours a day, digging, planting, earth flying, plowing, and there's his garden. 3 or 4 months later, he comes back to see what he planted. If you can imagine, he and I actually share a garden, or used to share a garden. I had to give it up because every time we were in the garden together, we'd spend 2 or 3 hours talking shop, and then he'd send me out to buy another pulp mill. As I've said, Frank's a very hard-working guy, no real ego, a man of the people. He's very focused on cost-cutting and efficiencies, and lately he's decided that a good way to cut costs and to look efficient would be to have everyone wear a uniform. Apparently he's designed this uniform himself. I'm just going to show what it looks like. Of the man himself. Each one of the master. Frank is a good neighbor, but living next door to him does have its drawbacks. You probably all know that he works very late at night. There's a story that 3, 4 o'clock in the morning one night, Frank looks over at our house, sees the lights out, and apparently is supposed to have said, "Jesus, am I the only guy in this company that works anymore?" We all know that Frank has this vision thing, and we often wonder how he can see into the future, to see what kind of company Tembec will be in 20 or 25 years. Well, I happen to know the man is actually a Swami. You know, a Swami is a person that can actually see into the future. And again, how do I know that? Well, I have a picture to prove it. Here's a picture of Frank in his Swami turban. I give it to him, you'll never see it. What I'm going to do is pass it around the table. When you finally finish with it, please present it to Mr. Dottori. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure for us all to be here this evening. I am excited, nervous, and vibrating like hell inside. I am 70 years young, 6'1", tall, and weigh 235 pounds. Now, this is my very first time in my life I'm talking through one of those things. Now, should I feel weak and fall, I'm sure it'll register 3.2 on the Richter scale. Philip Barrett and his brother were hired by Booth Lumber Forestry Division of Chippewa in the early 50s. Phil was a scaler and his brother was a woodsman. Therese Bushy was a secretary at the Chippewa office. Immediately, eye-to-eye contact was made between Philip and Therese. Phil's total English vocabulary was yes and no. His boss was Harry Lester, severe and sometimes difficult to work for. But Philip began very soon and very fast to speak English. A lot more eye-to-eye contact pursued, and eventually Therese and Philip were married in '59. Over the next few years, Philip and Booth were harmful. Well, hello, Dad, wherever you are up there. Philip has added fuel injection and an air turbo to boost the horsepower of his motor. I first met Philip at Grassy Lake in 1957. He was in charge of a logging operation where they transported logs overland from Mongoon Lake to Grassy Lake, a distance of 8 miles. The main bush camp was at Mongoon Lake. The bush road was rough, the trucks were small, and the loads were heavy, causing many truck mechanical failures. Philip called for another mechanic and he flew me to Grassy Lake. Philip was there with a crew of men and a temporary campsite. Was it ever temporary? His office was a small tent. The wash basin was the lake. And his toilet was an open-faced tar paper shelter with a pit behind it and a horizontal peeled spruce log so you could sit and balance yourself only if you had to go real bad. Here's another one for Philip. Philip has a great appetite. Whoa. Most people eat until they are satisfied or until they're full,